This video is sponsored by Trading 212, a platform that allows you to invest in real stocks and ETFs for free. If you use this code when you sign up, you can get one share worth up to €100 for free. In the 1950s and 60s, there was a race to create the first quartz watch. You had Seiko over in Japan, and then you had a consortium of 20 Swiss watch companies that had come together to try and win this race. Within that consortium was Rolex, but then Rolex also had a sneaky little plan. Welcome to Barkandjack, I'm Adrian. This channel is just about me exploring watches, drinking coffee, chatting with you guys, and if you want to support the channel, hit that subscribe button down there. A couple of weeks ago, I was in New York for the Global Red Bar meetup. One of the nights was hosted by Grand Seiko in Watches of Switzerland in Soho. I spotted on the wrist of one of the guys there an Oyster Quartz, a watch that I've been wanting to make a video on for a very, very long time. But these watches are quite hard to find in good condition and also in a situation where I can spend time with it. When I saw the watch, I jumped at the opportunity to ask the owner if I could make a little video about his watch. And it finally paid off that I carry this bag around that has like a makeshift studio in it. A big thanks to Carlos who allowed me to get hands-on with this watch. So go check out his Instagram account here and his YouTube channel. There'll be links in the description below. In the 1950s and 60s, there was a race to create the first quartz watch. The technology was there, people knew it could happen. It was just a matter of time before it was put into a mass-produced item. Over in Japan, you had Seiko versus, in Switzerland, a consortium of 20 brands which had come together to fight this race. In that consortium were people like Patek, Omega and Rolex. And Rolex were part of supporting this consortium to create the first quartz movement. They went so far as actually using the movement that came out, which was called the Beta 21, which was the first Swiss quartz movement. Now, Rolex obviously weren't happy just being another player within this big pool of other watch brands using the same movement. And so they actually went off and they had this secret plan. In 1971, Rolex tasked René Lecoultre to come up with their own quartz movement. And yes, René Lecoultre is part of the Lecoultre family. In 1977, Rolex launched the Oysterquartz range, which was an extension to the Datejust and the Day-Date. The Datejust version was powered by the caliber 50-35 and the Day-Date version was powered by the caliber 50-55. This range lasted until 2003, and testament to what René Lecoultre managed to develop, the movement was pretty much untouched for that 27-year lifespan. Now, before I tell you more about why this quartz movement is so special, let's have a quick look at the sponsor of this video. So Trading 212 is a way that you can actually own a share in one of your favorite companies. Now, Trading 212 democratizes the financial markets by letting anyone invest in thousands of real stocks and ETFs for free. You just need to get the app, open an account and start investing without paying any fees or commissions. If you use our code, then you can get one stock worth up to €100 for free. Before I bought my quartz Grand Seiko, I was very much in the camp of all quartz watches are the same. They're just cheap. They're very accurate, but they're just cheap, easy to make watches. And that's a very uneducated comment around quartz movements. Not all quartz movements are the same, and the Rolex movement just goes another step to show that there's a hierarchy in this quartz watch world. And Rolex managed to hit pretty much the top straight off the bat. To start off with the looks of the movement, Rolex actually went so far as to decorate the movement with Genevan stripes, and it also had 11 jewels inside. Now, their quartz movement is actually a thermocompensated quartz movement, and what that means is that as temperature changes, it doesn't impact the accuracy of the watch. And the accuracy is so good that Kosk actually certified this an electronic chronometer. It's accurate to -24 to +60 seconds a year. Because this was all such new technology, Rolex had to use some parts from Japan, but Rolex were very keen to bring, as I've understood, Rolex were very keen to bring all of that into Switzerland, and so they managed to source everything eventually from Swiss companies, even the battery. I think this is one of the most interesting watches from Rolex, and naturally as you go into vintage territory, there's a lot more interesting pieces than in modern, simply by the nature of it, the fact that there were fewer pieces back then, but also the design signature was slightly different. And I think the design signature of this is really quite departed from Rolex's standard styling of things. It's obviously a Rolex, it has a crown, and the dial could simply be lifted from a Datejust and plopped into this thing. But if you remove the dial, the whole thing could be from anyone. This watch also looks as if it's Rolex's response to the quartz kind of movement, but at the same time kind of jumping on that Gerald Genta bandwagon. There's a huge air of Royal Oak, Nautilus theme going on with the integrated bracelet, the shape of the case. It's obviously inspired by a Genta design. This particular version of the Oyster Quartz is a reference 17,000, and it has a beautiful Buckley dial on it. Now, with normal Datejusts, I prefer it when they have fluted bezels and when they have a Jubilee bracelet. But actually for the Oyster Quartz, I think this setup is perfect with the smooth bezel and the solid bracelet links. Although the links are large, the bracelet is actually incredibly comfortable. It does still hug your wrist. And it is 36mm wide, but it doesn't feel 36mm. I'm a big fan of 36mm watches. One of my favorite watches is my 36mm Explorer. But this actually wears a lot larger than 36mm, or rather it has a lot larger presence than a normal 36mm watch. Thanks to the fact that, or the design of the case, but also the way that the bracelet is integrated into the case. These watches are rare, and it's thought that Rolex only produced 25,000 Oyster Quartz watches, and put that into today's numbers around Rolex production, it would take less than 2 weeks for them to churn out all of those watches, the same amount of watches that they sold throughout the 27-year period. It also kind of highlights that these watches weren't particularly popular for Rolex. Rare doesn't always mean valuable. These watches, although they're not cheap by any standards, considering the small quantities that they're in and the kind of what they represent within the history of Rolex, they aren't actually worth all that much. A steel version will go from anything between 3,000 up to £6,000 and roughly the same in dollars. And if you go for an all gold version, it's around double that. I'd love to add one of these to my collection. I think it's an awesome looking watch, but more importantly, it's really interesting that this was Rolex's response to the whole quartz idea. Quartz was a futuristic technology. It was supposed to be the future of watches, and quite rightly, Rolex put it into, at the time, quite a futuristic looking watch. The departure from Rolex's standard design signature kind of highlights how much of a threat or how seriously they took this transition into the quartz world. So it's certainly an important piece within the history of Rolex's watchmaking, this kind of blip, this quartz era. It's an interesting part of that kind of back catalogue. It is kind of a benefit that the community still shuns quartz, because it means that these awesome looking watches with this very important part of history are still relatively affordable. They're still £3,000 is still a lot of money, but in the grand scheme of things, how important this watch is within the history of watchmaking and Rolex, I think that's still a bit of, I wouldn't say a bargain, but it's still, you get what I mean. Guys, I'd love to know what you think of these pieces, and whether you would go down the idea of getting a quartz Rolex. I know quartzes are still shunned. I still get people trolling me around, I don't know where it is, around my quartz Grand Seiko. So obviously spending that level of cash on a quartz Rolex, it's funny how we still have this stigma around quartz. It really is funny. Drop me a comment down below and let me know what you think. Jump over to barkandjack.com if you want to see previous videos and high-res images of this watch. Check me on Instagram at Barkandjack, and jump over to our shop, barkandjack.shop, and check out our leather straps and native straps. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.